All right, Game Masters, let's talk about a lie. A big one. A lie that's been whispered in GM forums, shouted in YouTube comments, and baked into almost every box set you've ever cracked open. The lie says there are only two ways to run a campaign: the sprawling, aimless sandbox or the rigid, suffocating railroad. Pick your poison. Total freedom or total control. Let your players wander the wilds or force feed them your epic. And most of us, we bought it. We picked a side. Some of us went full sandbox. We built hex maps like cartographers possessed, hundreds of factions, timelines that stretched back to the First Age. It felt kind of alive until the players just wandered. They bought potions, they flirted with merchants, they sidestepped every hook like they were allergic to plot. In the game, it didn't crash, it didn't explode, it just kind of stalled. Like a beautiful engine with no spark. Others of us went all in on story. We crafted arcs, built reveals, scripted emotional gut punches that would make BioWare blush. And then the rogue stole the wrong thing. The wizard burned down the orphanage. The cleric married the villain's ex. Everything bent sideways, and someone usually asked the question that no GM wants to hear. Are we even making choices anymore? That's the trap, because both of these models, Sandbox and Story Train, are built on the same broken assumption: that the story starts when the players engage. But here's the brutal, beautiful, campaign-saving truth. If the world only moves when the players move, then it's not a world, it's a diorama, a static display, something to be admired, but not survived. You felt this, I know you have. That creeping dread between sessions, your notes are tight, your NPCs are dialed. You've got drama coiled like a spring, but unless the players poke the right piece, nothing happens. And you start to wonder, did I prep the wrong stuff? Was I too rigid or not structured enough? You think it's you. It's not. It's the prep model you were sold. So let's set it on fire. Because the best campaigns, the ones your players won't shut up about 5 years from now, don't begin with the party. They begin with motion, with a world already turning, with a presence that doesn't care if the players show up or not. Not a plot, a will. This is the most important thing I'll say this entire episode. Heroes don't act, they react. Look at any story that hits hard. Lord of the Rings, Dark Knight, Infinity War. It's not the hero that makes the first move, it's the threat. Sauron doesn't wait for Frodo, he builds his army. The Joker doesn't wait for Batman, he instigates chaos. Thanos doesn't wait for the Avengers, he collects the Infinity Stones. They move, and their movement creates gravity. Suddenly the hero's journey isn't optional. It's not a suggestion, it's a necessity, because the world is spinning out of control. That's your job as a GM, not to build a sandbox, not to lay tracks. Your job is to light the fuse. Because once the explosion hits, the players stop wandering. They stop shopping. They stop making small talk with stable boys. They start planning, scheming, panicking. Not because you told them to care, but because the world demanded it. This dynamic approach forms the cornerstone of the Enginotica campaign building method. Enginotica eschews static worlds and predetermined railroads, focusing instead on generating machinations within the campaign. These machinations are meticulously built session by session, beat by beat, by charting the inexorable progress of the villain's journey. This is not merely a variation of the classic hero's journey. It is its inverse, its shadow. It represents a living timeline designed to escalate relentlessly regardless of player intervention. By focusing on what the world is already doing, driven by the villain's will, the campaign gains an inherent urgency and dynamism that traditional models struggle to achieve. And this is where the hot button take comes in. The question that will change your games forever. What if the heroes never came? What if there are no chosen ones? No ragtag misfits to rally the resistance? What if the world broke and no one stood in the way? That's the real question. Not what will my players do, not how do I get them to care. What happens if they don't? And from that one question, you build everything. You build the setting, you build the timeline, you build the threat that's already in motion. This isn't about writing a plot, it's about prepping a pulse. The world starts beating before the players even sit down, and when they do, they don't get a spotlight handed to them, they get a problem, a consequence, a force that won't stop unless they do something about it. So let's talk about the backbone of your campaign. Not a timeline, not a plot, a will. A character who is already acting, already moving, whether the players show up or not. We call it the villain's journey, and it is the cleanest, most reliable way to build a full campaign arc that never runs out of steam. The villain's journey defines a character in motion, not waiting to be discovered, not lurking behind a curtain, but already reshaping the world. They don't just oppose the players, they drive the campaign. They are the campaign's pacing engine. The villain's journey gives you 9 escalating phases, each one a tectonic shift, each one a visible consequence from their origin to the realization of their ultimate vision, if no one stops them. This is how you give your game urgency. This is how you give it gravity. When the villain acts, the world reacts. And that ripple, that escalation, it pulls the players in because it has to. Because the world is getting worse while they wait. That's your secret weapon. You're not baiting them with hooks. You're lighting a fuse. And once they hear the ticking clock, they can't ignore it. They have to respond. They start hunting the tension. They start trying to predict the next move. Not because you force them, but because they feel the stakes rising. This is where the villain's journey leaves the hero's journey in the dust. The hero's journey is great for novels, for movies, for stories where you control everything. But players, you don't control them. They hesitate, they poke the edges, they test the waters. You can't count on them to leap at the call. So don't wait for them. Build a villain who already did. The villain's journey becomes the anti-hero's journey. Every step the villain takes forces the players to move. Every victory they claim pushes the stakes higher. It's not a plot, it's machinations, and machinations work. Now here's where this gets tactical. Those 9 phases, they're your GM roadmap. They give you a clear sense of what's next without ever locking your players into a script. You know the villain's next play, but the players don't. To them, it just feels like the world is spiraling out of control. The danger is mounting and their window to act is shrinking. They don't see structure, they see consequences. And that's when the real decisions start. Did we wait too long? Can we still stop this? Suddenly your campaign feels alive. Not because you're winging everything, but because the villain's momentum never stops. The game has its own heartbeat now, and all you have to do is listen. And here's the twist. You already started building this. Back in the first session, you ran the Shattered World, if you watched my prior videos. You gave them something stable, then broke it. That was your beginning, but it was also the villain's. In Enginotica, we call this myth-binding. It means the same cataclysmic spark that launched your heroes, launched your villain too. Whatever happened in that session, the fire, the betrayal, the collapse, someone else saw it too. But where the heroes chose to heal the world, the villain chose to remake it. They don't need a new backstory, they don't need a second catalyst. They just need a different answer to the same question. That's the power of a shared origin. It makes everything personal. Your players don't need a monologue to understand the villain. They lived the same moment. They saw the same sky go black. Every move the villain makes now, it hits like a memory, like a threat with a familiar face. Because this isn't just stop the bad guy. This is, what if I made the other choice? The villain becomes a mirror, a warning, an alternate ending, walking around in real time. And that deepens everything. The emotional weight, the moral ambiguity, the stakes. This isn't just about saving the world. It's about what kind of world they're willing to save. Now let's build a campaign right now using a classic fantasy trope, the vengeful druid. Meet Silvara Thornheart. The shared inciting incident, phase 0 and 1, the first session. Hallowmere burned, not in a battle but by greed. A noble-backed syndicate pushed too far into an ancient glade. A forge sparked, the summer was dry, and the sacred grove, home of Silvara's circle, was reduced to ash. The heroes, your players, were there. One guarded the loggers, one lost a sibling in the blaze, one watched the fire spread and still dreams of it. They didn't start it, but they couldn't stop it. The villain, Silvara Thornheart, once a gentle guardian of the wild, is now a storm of roots and rage. When the king's envoys offered coin and apologies, she turned her back on civilization. She stopped believing the system could be fixed. Now, she's planning. She would return the land to nature by unmaking everything built upon it. This is her endgame. This is her session 9. You start with the end and go backwards. The entire kingdom's heartland is transformed into an untouched, impassable wilderness, civilization undone in one sweep. Now let's reverse engineer Sylvia's journey, making the world progressively worse, sadistically worse, if the players don't intervene. Session 0, the broken world. Every villain begins with a fracture, not mustache-twirling evil. Purpose, a world that's sick, a system that failed, a wrong they believed only they can right. They're not a monster, not yet. They're the one brave enough to fix what others ignore. Silvera sees the kingdom's expansion as a cancerous growth consuming the sacred wild. The burning of Hallowmere was not an accident, it was proof of humanity's incurable sickness. She believes only she can restore the true balance. World impact if players do nothing. The underlying rot in the world festers, corruption deepens, injustice becomes more entrenched, and the seeds of future catastrophe are sown, unnoticed by the general populace. The world is revealed as imperfect. The seeds of change or destruction are sown. Phase 1, the inciting incident. This is the definitive break for the villain, a betrayal, a tragedy, or a massacre that severs their past self from who they must become. This is their no more moment, where they stop surviving and begin reshaping the world. It turns the villain's pain into a mission. It doesn't just light the fuse, it tells them they're right. Silvara's machinations, the king's envoys offer coin and empty apologies for Hallowmere. Silvara, witnessing their callous disregard for nature, snaps. This is her never again. She turns her back on civilization, vowing to make them pay. And the world impact? The world is irrevocably altered. A powerful new will begins to manifest. This is the initial trauma that sets the villain's destructive path in motion. Often a public or widespread disaster that leaves a deep scar. That's your shattered world, your first session. Now session 2, the corrupting force. The villain acquires a source of power, a relic, a forbidden spell, a pact, or an impossible discovery. This power comes at a cost, and the villain accepts it, having already committed to their path. This is their deal with the devil moment, whatever it is. It comes at a cost, and they say yes. Silvara's machinations. She begins gathering relics from the lost vaults of her burned grove. Not to study them, but to unleash them. She finds an ancient, corrupted seed from a forgotten world tree, a source of immense, destructive nature magic. She accepts its power, knowing the cost. And what's the impact if the players do nothing? Strange blights begin to appear in isolated farming villages. Crops wither overnight, livestock fall ill. It looks like an unexplained pestilence, but it's Silvara's first act of vengeance, a subtle curse on the farmlands. News of crop failures spreads. Traders raise prices and a quiet dread settles over rural areas. Session 3, Villains Journey Phase 3, Crossing the Forbidden Threshold. The villain makes their first overt, public, and irreversible move. A city is razed, a taboo is shattered, or a life is extinguished. There is no turning back now for them, nor for the world. No more shadows. They act publicly, brutally. Silvara's machinations. She incites an army of treefolk and enraged beasts to destroy a frontier hamlet that was built too deep into the forest. This isn't a subtle raid. It's a full-on assault. World impact if players do nothing. The hamlet is utterly razed. Survivors flee to nearby towns, babbling about the forest coming alive, about roots tearing buildings apart. The road becomes plagued by wild animal attacks. Logging camps are found abandoned with claw marks everywhere. Trade routes shut down. The world is left reeling, and the scale of the threat becomes terrifyingly clear. Session 4, Phase 4, Ascent to Power. The villain's influence expands. Followers gather, assets grow, and their philosophy begins to become policy. Their movement gains significant momentum often with a compelling, if twisted logic. They're not hiding, they're recruiting. Their philosophy is catching on. Silvara's machinations. She seeks an old druidic artifact, the Heart of the Wild, a crystal from the world tree that can greatly strengthen nature magic. She sends her corrupted fae and beast minions to retrieve it from ancient ruins or vaults of a local lord. The impact if players do nothing. Silvara successfully acquires the Heart of the Wild. Her powers and confidence soar. Entire forest regions become unnaturally overgrown and impassable and hostile. Travelers vanish without a trace, replaced by something older and more primal. Her philosophy of nature's supremacy begins to spread, terrifying those who hear it. By this phase, countless people are already suffering from blighted lands, destroyed homes, and dangerous travel routes. The machinations are causing widespread harm. Phase 5, the revelation of power. The villain commits an act so grand and terrifying that they can no longer be ignored. A tower explodes, a sun is blotted out, the dead begin to stir. Any hope of containing the threat vanishes. Everyone now understands its true scale. The mask drops, the villain flexes. Hard. Silvara's machinations. She unleashes a major offensive. She incites an army of treefolk and enraged beasts to assault a large human settlement at the forest edge, the town of Oakhart. This is a full-on assault, her wrath made manifest in open battle. What's the world impact if the players do nothing? Oakhart falls. Hundreds of people become refugees, streaming onto the roads, their homes destroyed, their lives shattered. The map of the region literally changes, with Oakhart wiped off or occupied by possessed flora. The world is gripped by widespread fear, realizing the immense danger. Any hope of containing the threat vanishes. Episode 6. The Fractured Empire. Cracks appear within the villain's own organization. A trusted lieutenant betrays them, a ritual misfires, or doubt creeps into their ranks or their own mind. They respond by tightening their grip, but their control is tested. Silvara's machinations. She pulls back to consolidate her gains and prepare for the final phase of her ritual. Some fey or corrupted beasts resist her increasingly extreme methods. She responds by tightening her grip, sacrificing those who falter or fail to fuel her power. World impact if the players do nothing. Silvara gains a vast swath of forest as her territory, making travel perilous and/or impossible. Her internal stability is challenged, but her brutal response makes her even more terrifying. Despair deepens as the villain's control becomes absolute in the affected regions, and the cost of her vision becomes horrifyingly clear. Session 7. Collapse of the Mask. The ideology and justifications for the villain's actions fall away, revealing their raw, often hurt, monstrous, yet fundamentally human self. This represents the last opportunity for their redemption, however slim. No more lies, no more cause, just will. Silvara's machinations. Silvara commences her final ritual. She needs a blood sacrifice of something royal, of royal blood to fuel the spell. And she targets the king himself, bringing the ritual right to the seat of human power. World impact if players do nothing. The king is captured and fatally wounded, his lifeblood fueling Silvara's spell. The true, unvarnished nature of the villain is exposed. The capital city's great oak, a symbol of the kingdom, begins to twist and writhe, becoming a conduit for primal, destructive magic. The conflict's emotional stakes deepen, and any last hope for redemption vanishes. Session 8. The Final Approach. The villain's ultimate plan is in its final stage. A ritual is nearly complete. Armies march, alliances crumble, or the last key turns. Time is almost entirely depleted for those who would stop them. They go all in. The last artifact, the final ritual, the irreversible act. Silvara's machinations. Her ultimate plan is in its final stages. The ritual is nearly complete. The environment around the ritual site becomes epic and dangerous. A swooling portal of primal magic engulfs the grove, or the capital city's sky turns black as giant roots crack the streets. She unleashes her toughest guardians, elemental avatars, and enchanted knights of the forest to protect the ritual. World impact if the players do nothing? The world teeters on the brink of the villain's ultimate triumph. The stakes are at their absolute highest. The kingdom's heartland begins to permanently transform into an untouched, wild wilderness. Civilization is visibly undone, its fate sealed. The sky breaks, allies flee, and time itself seems to fracture. And then the final session, the climactic confrontation, Phase 9. The culmination of the villain's journey. Their plan either succeeds completely or it is definitively thwarted. The players are not the storytellers. They are the final line of defense, acting to prevent the villain's vision from becoming reality. This is it. The spiral meets the sword. Silvara's machinations. Her ritual succeeds. She reaches for godhood or oblivion. The world impact, if the players do nothing. Silvara's ritual succeeds. The heart of the kingdom becomes an impassable, enchanted forest forever lost to humanity. The fate of the world is decided, and a new era begins, shaped by the outcome of this final struggle. The players, if they even survive, are left to flee with whoever they could save in living in a post-apocalyptic world they failed to prevent. This is how you build a villain's journey that matters. Start with your Session 1 break. Look for someone in the background who experienced it differently. Let session 2 be their first real choice. Let each session deploy the next beat of their rise and tie every stage back to the original wound. That's not just prep, that's myth binding. One event, two futures. Once you've myth bound the villain to the same inciting incident, ask, what do they ultimately want the world to become? That's your finale. The final session, session 9. This clear destination provides an unwavering anchor for all subsequent preparation. With the villain's ultimate goal firmly in place, the GM then reverse engineers the entire campaign. This involves asking a series of crucial questions. What has to happen for them to get there? This process is not about inventing a linear plot, but rather outlining a precise sequence of actions. The GM identifies the major steps the villain must take, working backward from session 9 to session 1. Each step in this reverse sequence represents a key phase in the villain's ascent, becoming progressively bigger, riskier, and more visible as the timeline approaches. This might involve acquiring a specific weapon, securing a ritual site, corrupting a bloodline, taking a royal hostage, or initiating a war to mask their true intentions. This reverse engineering approach creates a dynamic and escalating timeline that inherently drives the campaign forward. When players intervene, the villain's ideal path may bend, forcing them to adapt their methods. However, their ultimate destination remains fixed. Conversely, if the players hesitate or fail to act decisively, the villain simply accelerates their plans. The campaign's timeline does not pause or wait, it advances relentlessly, ensuring that every session carries significant weight and consequences. This method is not about designing breadcrumbs for the players to follow, but rather mapping a villain's climb to power. This structured approach to campaign design provides a powerful advantage. It creates the illusion of a completely player-driven narrative while maintaining a robust framework for the GM. The GM's foreknowledge of the villain's fixed endgame and pre-planned sequence of actions establishes a strong underlying current for the campaign. Player actions, rather than derailing the villain's ultimate goal, instead compel the villain to adapt their methods. For instance, if players successfully thwart a ritual, the villain might seek an alternative source of power or a different means to achieve the same destructive end. This dynamic provides players with genuine agency because their choices have visible, tangible consequences, directly influencing how the narrative unfolds. Even if the villain's overarching ambition persists, this fosters a shared reality between the GM and the players where the world is constantly in motion, and player choices genuinely shape its trajectory without the GM losing control of the narrative's fundamental direction. The effective implementation of the villain's journey necessitates a fundamental paradigm shift in how GMs approach weekly preparation. The focus moves away from prepping encounters, attempting to anticipate every player action and design bespoke scenarios, to prepping machinations. The core of weekly prep simplifies to one critical question. What's the villain doing this session? This single session becomes the entirety of the GM's preparation, streamlining the process and ensuring consistent narrative momentum. The weekly workflow for a GM operating within this framework is remarkably efficient. First, reaffirm the endgame. Each week you briefly remind yourself of the villain's ultimate goal and the final state they wish to impose upon the world. This anchors your focus, preventing narrative drift and ensuring every villainous action contributes to the grand design. Second, choose their next move. You then ask, if the players do nothing this session, what happens? That's what the villain is doing. Recovering a lost artifact, corrupting a sacred leader, opening the next seal, recruiting an ally, burning a city to cover their trail. It doesn't matter if the players follow the breadcrumbs. The world moves. And if they do get involved, now you've got conflict, not just content. In The Dark Knight, if Batman had not intervened, the Joker would have successfully poisoned the city's trust in its heroes. Third, introduce the result, not the plan. Don't have the villain monologuing from a throne. Let the world show the fallout. For instance, players might arrive in a town to discover all the statues missing, only to later learn that they were animated and used to attack a monastery. This reveals the villain's move, weaponizing sacred symbols to break morale or something, through consequence, presenting the players with a clue, a mystery, and a choice. This approach adds weight to the world, as events unfold independently of the player's knowledge or presence. Let player action reshape the path. While the 9 steps of the villain's journey represent the antagonist's ideal path, player interference is not only expected, but it's encouraged. When players succeed or fail in their endeavors, the villain's method of achieving their goal may shift, but their ultimate destination remains constant. If players successfully prevent a relic from being stolen, the villain might seek it through a pact or a betrayal. If a villain's war priest is killed, the villain might turn to undead forces instead of loyal living ones. Your role each week is to track what just happened and how does the villain respond. What's their next step? This ensures that the campaign remains dynamic and responsive without requiring you to discard the established arc. This is not railroading. It is escalation, a shared reality where both you and the players contribute to the narrative's unfolding. All these actions maintain machinations without dictating a single player choice. This method significantly streamlines GM preparation, creating an efficiency multiplier for consequence-driven prep. By focusing on what the villain is doing this session and showing the results, not the plan, you shift your mental model from the impossible task of predicting player actions to the manageable task of advancing a pre-planned villainous arc. This drastically reduces GM prep time, often to 30 minutes or less per session, because the GM is not building bespoke encounters for every conceivable player choice. Instead, they are simply advancing a predefined external threat. Player choices then become meaningful reactions to this advancing threat, generating organic plot points and narrative branches without the GM needing to invent them from scratch. This makes the campaign feel richer and more responsive with considerably less GM effort. Now let's address the elephant in the room, the hot button question. Isn't this just railroading the players in the story into a story the GM already decided? Absolutely not. In fact, it's the polar opposite. Railroading means forcing the players along a predetermined path of events, no matter what they do. But in our villain's journey approach, the players can do anything. And those decisions determine the outcomes. If the heroes had chosen to guard the temple on day 3, the relic theft might have been prevented entirely. The timeline would change on the spot. Maybe the cult leader has to improvise a new plan because his first scheme failed. You, the GM, would roll with that update logically. Perhaps the cult attempts a riskier second theft, or maybe they try to bargain for the relic later. The point is, your prep isn't a script that must be followed. It's a safety net of, what if the PCs don't intervene? If they do intervene, fantastic. The story pivots based on their actions. That's player agency at its finest. On the flip side, if the heroes ignore every clue and wander off to the other side of the map, then yes, the villain's plan will unfold in full. That's not railroading, that's consequences. There's a big difference. In a railroaded campaign, Greyhaven would burn no matter what because the GM decreed it in the plot outline. In our world in motion model, Greyhaven burns only because the heroes failed to stop it. The opportunity was there. The freedom was there. The heroes had agency, and the tragedy happened as a result of how events actually played out. That's fair game. In fact, it's more fair and far more interesting than a railroad because the players can change the outcome if they act differently. What about a sandbox? In a pure sandbox game, nothing really happens in the world until the players wander into it. The villain might as well be a piece of scenery waiting indefinitely for the PCs to find him. Sure, the players have freedom in the sandbox, but there's often no momentum. There's no ticking clock. Some groups end up feeling a lack of direction or urgency in a sandbox because the world politely sits in stasis until the PCs poke it. So in a world in motion campaign, here the players have the ultimate freedom, and the world has a life of its own. It's the best of both. The players can go anywhere, do anything, but wherever they aren't, things are still humming along. That creates a constant stream of plot hooks and reactive events without stealing agency. It energizes your sandbox into a living ecosystem. And let's be real, villains in stories don't just wait around. Sauron didn't wait in Mordor twiddling his thumbs, hoping the Fellowship might swing by. He was out conquering and hunting for the ring. If the heroes hadn't acted, Middle-earth would have fallen. That's the vibe you want. Your villain is proactive and will make the world worse if not stopped. That doesn't make them an all-powerful DMPC or something. It makes them a credible threat. It gives weight to the entire campaign. Players love when the villain feels one step ahead, right up until the heroes cleverly turn the tables. In the end, the villain's journey approach to prep is about freedom and consequence. It's about trusting your prep and your players enough to let the story emerge at the table. You're not hand-holding them down a single path, and you're not leaving them adrift in a featureless sandbox. You're creating a rich environment where things happen and every choice matters. The goal is to run a game that feels like an epic story without forcing a story on your players. By forgetting the false dichotomy of sandbox versus railroad, you're embracing the truth. A living world is the ultimate way to prep. It's prep that empowers player agency and still delivers dramatic, coherent narrative moments. So set your world in motion. Let your villain scheme and conquer if the heroes don't stop them. And when your players rise to the challenge or struggle and then rise again, you'll all experience something magical, a campaign that lives. Your players will talk about it for years, the time the world almost ended because they took too long at the tavern, or the clutch moment they cut the red wire with seconds to spare. These are the memories that legendary games are made of. The time for waiting for player buy-in, hoping they chase hooks, or writing unused box text is over. The call to action for every game master is clear. Light the fuse. Let the war begin before they even arrive, by allowing the villain to move and the story to unfold without permission. GMs create a world where players arrive to find themselves already behind. This is where the game truly comes alive, where legends are forged, and where campaigns become unforgettable. For those ready to embrace this transformative approach to campaign building, further tools and community support are available. The Enginotica core rulebook provides everything needed to construct the villain's journey and create campaigns with the Enginotica D19 system, available now on DriveThruRPG. Our Patreon offers access to games led by me as your GM, and live villain building workshops and further GM resources and training. Additionally, the Discord community provides a platform to share tools, seek advice, join games, and collaborate on villain timelines. This is not merely about joining a game. It is about joining a movement dedicated to unleashing the full potential of RPG storytelling. Do not wait. Do not plot. Light the fuse. The world awaits, and its fate will be determined by those who dare to step into the fire. See you in the spiral, my friends.